It was one of those sticky, humid summer nights in rural Ohio when 16-year-old Emily and her family pulled up to their new house. The farmhouse was old, charming in that sort of you can tell it has stories to tell kind of way, but it had its quirks. It creaked, groaned, and every now and then, there was a shadow that seemed to move even though the place was empty. At first glance, it felt like the kind of house you'd expect to find in one of those old ghost stories. Her parents loved it. They saw the big yard and the character, and honestly, who wouldn't want a piece of history? But to Emily, it felt like something out of a horror flick. She wasn't sure what it was exactly, but it was like the house had eyes. Or maybe she was just letting her imagination run wild. Still, there was one part of the house that always got to her: the basement. The rest of the house, yeah, sure, it had potential. Cozy with a little love. But the basement, cold, dark, and welcoming. It had an eerie vibe, with old furniture covered in dusty sheets, random boxes that looked like they'd been gathering cobwebs for decades, and these weird metal contraptions that hummed softly late at night. It wasn't a place you'd want to spend too much time in. One evening, Emily was unpacking in her room when she heard her mom calling down the hallway. "Emily, can you come help in the basement? We need to clear out some old stuff." Great, just what she wanted. But she dragged herself down anyway, flashlight in hand. The air in the basement felt heavier, like it was hard to breathe down there. She could barely see anything. Her flashlight only lit up a small patch of space. Her mom had asked her to move some boxes, and as she did, she tripped on something. She looked down and found a crumpled piece of paper. When she unfolded it, she stared at it for a second, confused. It was a poorly drawn map of the house, with a big red X marking the basement. It looked like something a kid would scribble. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that it was out of place. She shoved it aside, trying to brush it off as some weird coincidence. Then she heard it. At first, it was so faint, just a little shuffle of feet in the corner of the room. She figured it was the house settling, or maybe a mouse, but the sound grew louder. And that's when she realized it wasn't the house. It wasn't a mouse. Someone was moving around in the farthest corner, trying to be quiet. "Hello," Emily called out, trying to keep her voice steady. No answer. Just the shuffle, getting louder. Her heart started racing. Slowly, she turned toward the corner, her breath caught in her throat. That's when she saw it. A figure, tall and unnaturally thin, stood in the shadows. Its features were completely hidden, but Emily could feel it watching her. She didn't wait around to figure out what it was. She bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind her. She told her parents, of course, but when they went to check the basement, there was no one there. The door was locked, the room empty. They told her it was all in her head. Probably just her imagination running wild, but Emily knew better. Something was there, something waiting. After that, things got worse. The house started feeling more alive in a creepy, unsettling way. There were footsteps at night, whispers that seemed to come from the walls, creaks that made it feel like someone was always just a few steps behind her. And it all pointed back to the basement. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was down there before was still hiding in the house, waiting. Then, one night, she was getting ready for bed when she heard it again. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. The same kind of steps she'd heard in the basement. And they were coming from behind her bedroom door. Her hands were trembling as she reached for the doorknob. What if it was the same figure from the basement? What if it was still lurking around, watching her? She tried to calm herself, but when she finally opened the door, there was nothing there. Just silence. The next morning, though, Emily's mom found something odd on the doorstep. No return address. Just a single, shaky sentence written on paper: "I'm still here." It didn't take long for Emily to realize someone or something had been hiding in that house the whole time. And maybe, just maybe, it was still there, watching, waiting. Could someone be living right under your feet, hiding in your own home? How would you ever know if you never checked? Katie had always dreamed of living in a big city, like Chicago. So, when she landed a job at a tech company after college, she didn't waste any time snagging an apartment in the heart of the city. The loft she found was perfect, a mix of sleek modern amenities and that old school charm. Big windows let in loads of natural light, and the exposed brick walls gave the place a cool, industrial vibe. But something about it didn't quite sit right with her. The landlord, an older guy with thick glasses, had given her the tour. But there was one thing he said that stuck with her: just don't go in that room. It was the way he said it, careful, almost too careful, that made Katie feel like there was something more to it. A basement, an attic. What could be so bad about one room in an apartment? Katie didn't think much about it at first. After settling in, life was busy. But a few weeks later, during a freak storm that knocked out the power across the city, everything changed. The whole building went pitch black. She grabbed her phone, turned on the flashlight, and started to navigate her way through the darkness. Then, as she passed the hallway, she heard something, a soft creak. The bookshelf that had been blocking the door to that strange room was moving. It wasn't a lot, just enough to make the door crack open. Her curiosity kicked in, and even though the landlord's warning was still fresh in her mind, she couldn't help herself. She had to see what was inside. When she opened the door, her stomach dropped. The room was dusty, like it hadn't been touched in decades. Old furniture was scattered around, chairs, tables, and boxes. But the thing that freaked her out the most was the photograph lying in the middle of the floor. Katie knelt, heart racing, and picked it up. She turned it over, and on the back, in neat handwriting, was a note. It's her. Her breath caught in her throat. The photo was of a little girl, and the little girl in the photo was her. Katie's face stared back at her with wide eyes and a frozen smile. But the worst part, she had no memory of ever being in that room. She didn't remember that photo being taken, or even being that little. Nothing about it made sense. Panicking, Katie slammed the door shut and locked it. But the weirdness didn't stop there. Over the next few days, she started hearing whispers around the apartment. Soft, faint voices that sounded like her own. She'd spin around, thinking maybe someone was there. But every time, there was nothing. The feeling of being watched started to settle over her, like the apartment wasn't entirely hers anymore. And the more she thought about the strange room, the photograph, and the whispers, the more everything seemed connected. Then one night, as she was lying in bed, there came a knock at her door. She opened it, expecting maybe a neighbor or something, but there was nothing, just a small, folded note on the floor. She picked it up and folded it with trembling hands, and read the chilling words, "I'm still here." The photo, the whispers, the note. Katie couldn't shake the feeling that she was not alone in her own home. Someone, or something, was still there. But who had put that photo there? How could it possibly be of her when she'd never even been in that room? The questions kept her awake long into the night, and she was more certain than ever whatever was in that room was not finished with her yet.